Great. I'm going to great. I'm going to bring us on in a moment.
Okay, and we're going to do what? 20 minutes or?
Yeah, whatever. That's fine. 20 minutes is great.
Okay.
Perfect. All right. We're back. And as promised, I have Mr. Lieutenant Governor Peter Kinder on the line with us this morning. As I'd mentioned to you, there's a couple of things that we're going to talk with Mr. Kinder about. He is the Lieutenant Governor here in the state of Missouri. He is, which is kind of unusual, he is a Republican while we have a Democratic governor here in the state of Missouri. And Mr. Kinder has been outspoken on a number of things that have been going on in the state of Missouri, which I applaud. But more importantly, yesterday, he embarked on a kind of a principled act of civil disobedience by effectively going over to a federal park that had been shuttered as a result of this shutdown. It's called Big Spring. And so I've asked him to join with us on the line this morning to kind of discuss it a little bit. And also I want to get his feelings on some other things related to Obamacare, as I talked about in our last segment, and the general concepts of civil disobedience related to Obamacare, related to these shutdowns, related to NSA and these spying allegations and things like that. So good morning, Lieutenant Governor. How are you?
Good morning, Mike. Thank you for having me on. I'm doing great.
Well,
we had a great day yesterday. We had a great day yesterday over Big Springs along the Current River.
Yeah, I'm glad that you were able to join us. Thanks. I've watched some of the documentation. I've looked at some of the news. I've seen some of the pictures. You had a group of folks that went over there with you. I think there were about 75 folks joined you. Is that correct?
Between 70 and 80.
That's
we were expecting 8. We were expecting 8 or 10 or a dozen maybe, and word spread informally without any formal notice, and almost 80 people showed up.
Well, that's outstanding. I'm really pleased with that showing because, I think it's important that we send a message not only in Washington, but in local locations like the Big Spring and like these other national parks that, these are our parks. We've paid for these things already. They're ours. We own them.
This was one of Missouri's first state parks in the 1920s. And we had it a state park until 1969 when I think it was unwisely deeded over to the feds.
Sure. I got a question for you on this issue. When this stuff is deeded over to the feds, are they utilizing a lot of this property as what you would term to be handed over to these international bodies for total control? In other words, are they utilizing a lot of these national parks and putting them into like a global consortium of property that is controlled by these conservation groups and such, at least to your knowledge?
Well, Mike, I have no evidence that has occurred here in this instance, but that may be the agenda down the road. Who knows? Sure.
Well, you were joined by Steve Cookson, Doug Leibla, and a county commissioner over there and a group of veterans. You actually went in there and removed these barriers and went into the park. And so tell me a little bit about that. Did you have any good press coverage while you were there?
Well, we had the CBS affiliate in Cape Girardeau, KFES, came out and covered it, Channel 12. And they had reports at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 10 o'clock last night on their newscast. The Daily American Republic newspaper was there yesterday. They do not publish on the holiday. Yesterday did not. And so their first edition will be this afternoon. We had some great conservative bloggers who I hope your listeners are familiar with. Dwayne Lester at Missouri Torch.
Yep.
We should all be plugged into and regularly looking at Missouri Torch. And then also the Gateway Pundit, one of the most high-traffic conservative websites in the country. Jim Hoft is the Gateway Pundit in St. Louis, and they all covered it. And Dana Lash's radio show, which has a huge listenership in the St. Louis market, also have me on right after we finish. Now, I want to correct one thing. We went there to remove barriers, but when we got there, the barriers were already removed by the Park Service. So we think they got wind that we were coming and pulled them down.
They tried to kind of discredit your whole operation, essentially.
That would be one fair reading of it, Mike.
You know, Dana's got a good show. I know you did an interview there, and that story, folks, is up on the MissouriTorch.com. If you're interested in going to it, you can go to the MissouriTorch.com. You'll see a link there to this story. Lieutenant Governor Peter Kinder defies a shutdown and invades Big Spring National Park with veterans. You can click on that link, and there is about a 7 or 8 minute segment where Lieutenant Governor Kinder is interviewed by Dana Lash at the Dana Lash Show. So there was a quote out there from you that we, the people of Missouri, have had enough of the arrogant ruling class in D.C., and we're not going to continue to take it. We're out here to make a point and demonstrate it for one and all to see that the people of Missouri, especially the people of southern Missouri and the Ozarks, are not going to take this. We're here to give the ruling class in Washington, D.C. their answer, that these beautiful national areas belong to all the people. Have you gotten any kind of feedback whatsoever on the federal side from any of our, illustrious alleged representatives, i.e. McCaskill, Blunt, or Jason Smith?
No feedback from the senators. Jason Smith had a representative there who read a letter from him.
Okay.
But I would say minimal feedback. The feedback that I'm looking for, Mike, is not from them. It's from the people.
Oh, I hear you there.
We posted our the articles and the links that you just mentioned on my Facebook pages. I have a fan page that folks can go and like, and where we have the Gateway Pundit and the Missouri Torch up, and they were shared dozens and dozens of times, and I hope some of your listeners will go there and share them again, because it's my case is left to those federal officials or anybody in the Obama administration. I've had it with them. My case is to the people of Missouri.
Right. Well, the real issue at this point is that, and that's one of our goals here, is to educate and inform people, make them aware of what's going on, and then activate them and get them motivated to take action on a grassroots level. And, that's one of the things that you did here yesterday with this event was, I've seen like St. Louis today has thrown you under the bus for it, stating that it was either a principled act of civil disobedience or a cynical stunt, depending upon the point of view. Personally,
yeah, and that was a news article, Mike. That was in a news article. That was not an opinion commentary piece.
No, I get it. I mean, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch couldn't be more. I call them the Ministry of Propaganda. I don't even call them the mainstream media anymore, because at this point, it's clear that they've taken sides with government against the citizenry. And it's not just related to this issue. It's everything that they touch, where they're talking about the federal government, state governments, shutdowns, Obamacare, NSA, all of these different issues. It's apparent that the Ministry of Propaganda is completely and totally on the side of government, whether that's big government on the state or the federal side. They are all about that.
And one of their most recent editorials called anybody who thinks like you and I do racist.
I don't understand how the term racist can be tied in any way, shape, or form to Obamacare, the federal shutdown, these parks being closed off and sealed off from the people who own them and have paid for them. It's, and the truth is, they're spending more money trying to actually hurt us in a hissy fit than they are actually doing before the shutdown.
Absolutely. That was true of the veterans over the weekend on the mall with the World War II Memorial, which is an open-air monument. There isn't anything there is no structure to close. It involves the expenditure of more resources to put the tape around it and barricades up, and the manpower it takes to do that than it does to keep the darn thing open.
Exactly.
People to wander in and out of. And the same thing with our park. Now let me update you. Late last night, Mike, I was notified by Representative Steve Cookson, who I can't thank enough for his work over the weekend. We just pulled this together on the fly from Saturday night to yesterday morning.
Sure.
And I can't thank Steve Cookson enough. And he called me. It was going on 10 o'clock, and I was giving up on the Cardinal game. And he said, did you know that we just got an email from one of the vendors, one of the business people down there, who's been hurt very badly by this shutdown, by the way. And he said, after we left, many of the barriers went back up.
Really?
So this is going to be a continuing struggle, Mike, and your listeners need to know we're going to have to regroup and decide how to go forward.
So essentially he was informing you that after this was all done and said, and you guys left, they turned around and put the barriers right back up.
Yes, and after the media left.
I got to tell you, that borders on the criminal.
Well, it's just so disgusting. I mean, my point is, one of my quotes yesterday that got repeated a lot is, we are not serfs to a federal master. And that's the way they're treating us.
That is the absolute truth. I
said we the people created the government, including the federal government. The states created the federal government. They are not our masters.
Well, I sure wish we could have gotten the guys over in the House and the Senate to override the governor's veto on the Second Amendment Preservation Act with that thinking. But instead they turned around and said that this would violate the Supremacy Clause, which apparently none of them have ever actually read.
Well, they'll have another crack at that in January. I think they'll pass a bill that we can all get behind.
I hope that we can all get behind it, because I have to tell you, if it turns out to be some watered-down milquetoast thing, I'm going to rail against it. I haven't seen it, and I have no idea what it's going to look like, but I'm hoping that they're going to take it. And I'll tell you something else. While they're at it, I'd like to see some sort of an anti-Obamacare act in there, along with the Anti-Agenda 21 Act, so that we are protected by the state interposing itself between the citizenry and a federal government completely out of control on this Obamacare thing.
Well, absolutely, Mike. That's what my lawsuit back in 2010 was about. I thought somebody in state government and statewide office should stand up and fight for the rights of Missourians to direct our own health care choices. Nobody else was doing it, so I undertook the responsibility of raising private funds to pay the six-figure lawyer bills, and I tackled that challenge myself.
You know, I've been promoting the concept that people should simply opt out of this Obamacare, especially this first year, because the penalty is limited to $95. And my concern with this is that Obamacare is less about, or it has nothing to do almost with health care. It's just a convenient, expedient excuse. But the real goal of this thing is for absolute control of the individual, and it's for building these dossiers that, combined with the IRS and the NSA, are essentially building files in a database on every single American. And
did you see that so some people attempting to enroll, and they can't enroll on the exchanges, there's some kind of a notice to would-be enrollees that ought to stop anyone from enrolling, and that is the notice pops up, says you have no reasonable expectation of privacy on this data that you're handing over.
Well, it actually
now,
goes...
They're putting the IRS in charge of our health care, and we know that the IRS has committed crimes in abusing the rights of Americans and turning over private data to the White House.
You know, that warning actually is worse than that. In some of these state exchanges, and the same applies in the federal exchange, they're actually indicating that this information is being distributed and disseminated to law enforcement and for audit purposes. And what they're doing is they've passed a law that forces you to sign up with a program where you have to agree to waive your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. And I would love to see... Wow. I mean, I'm actually, and I called for it earlier in an earlier segment, for an attorney to step up and file a lawsuit basically stating that by their forcing you to utilize this website and submit all of this data, and then telling you that it's going to be used for audit and law enforcement purposes, that they are forcing you to violate your Fifth Amendment right to refuse to incriminate yourself. Because you're being forced to submit the data, so you're being forced to incriminate yourself for any audit or any future law enforcement that they may choose to do on, against you. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you have put your finger on something important. I would also say, though, that I think we're seeing Obamacare collapse, implode, whatever verb you want to use. And I don't believe the IRS, they have a fine. You mentioned the fine earlier. I don't believe the IRS and the Obama administration is going to be able to fine people for not signing up for Obamacare when they can't sign up for it on these stupid websites that don't work.
Well, I agree with that, sure. I mean, they're going to have a hard time prosecuting that or billing somebody $95 when you couldn't even get in to sign up on it. But, this issue goes beyond this in the sense that one of the other areas, I did an entire segment about this earlier, I'll email you a link for it later. One of the other things that nobody is talking about, and I haven't heard a legislator talk about it, I haven't heard the media talk about it, and I haven't heard a single radio host or anybody in any of the watchdog groups talk about it, is that when you are placed into the Medicaid rolls because you fall below a certain threshold of income, you are subject to Medicaid rules, which means that if you own your small farm or your home because it's been handed down through hereditary generations, and you utilize any of these healthcare functions under the new Medicaid system that you're forced into using because your income is below the threshold, you sell that house later on down the road, and they can walk in and take away whatever nest egg you thought you had been building up under Medicaid rules.
Yeah, wow.
I mean,
there are just so many invasions of our liberty involved here, and you're right. That's why I've been fighting it for 4 years, Mike.
So how can we help you continue down this path of fight?
Well, we can help. You can help by strengthening legislators in the House and Senate in Missouri to continue to resist the siren call of the hospitals to expand Medicaid. That they are pushing the expansion of Medicaid, and expanding Medicaid, which is a failed program, is really the heart of Obamacare. If we refuse to expand Medicaid, which the legislature courageously did this year, you have disabled a lot of the building of Obamacare infrastructure in our state. Beyond that, we also refused to set up the health care exchanges at the state level that are called for in Obamacare. That means that we were one of about 30 states that forced the federal government to do our exchange if they want to do it under Obamacare.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that it's now out of our hands altogether, and we don't have any say-so in what happens. Well,
but we wouldn't have had any real say-so had we set up our own state exchange either. They are state exchanges in name only, and Kathleen Sebelius, the failing Secretary of Health and Human Services in the Obama administration, she is the dictator, the czarina of health care under these exchanges. Her problem is that when she has to do so many federal exchanges, when states like Missouri refuse to set up one, it's a task larger than they can handle, as we are seeing with all these breakdowns.
What are your thoughts on the concept of people simply opting out, at least initially in this first year?
I say opt out, Mike. Listen, is there an Obamacare card that we can burn? Remember the burning of the draft cards in the 60s?
Yeah. Well, how about just
burn your Obamacare card?
We could probably just use the dollar bill as a substitute for the entire federal system. That might be just as representative.
I think Missourians are opting out of Obamacare already. We opted out with our vote in 2010 for the Healthcare Freedom Act.
Yeah, but we
opted out.
Yeah, but 72% of Missouri said no, and then McCaskill went ahead and voted for it anyway. Said she knew better than us.
And Governor Nixon, who would not pronounce the word Medicaid during his entire 4-year term of office, and at no time in his re-election campaign last year, 3 weeks after the election, all of a sudden the most important issue in the state to him is what? Expanding Medicaid. Signing on to the Obama agenda. When Missourians had voted twice against it. We voted against it last summer. I'm talking a year ago, 2012.
Right.
Again.
I am a proponent of active civil disobedience, not only like what you did yesterday with the group over at the Big Spring, the federal park, but also against this healthcare exchange. I'd like your thoughts real quickly on how we can send a message about the same thing. I don't know if you heard the story this morning about the NSA collecting these literally hundreds of millions of email addresses, many of them United States addresses. And what's been going on with that whole spy scandal, I'm sure you're aware of it. What can we do as citizens to say, we've had enough with that as well? I mean, this isn't just limited to, they're building dossiers on us. What else can you call it? When they tell us that they can store this information on us for 10 years, that's a dossier. You can call it whatever else you want, but that's what it is. And I've challenged my listeners repeatedly for anyone to give me one legitimate, valid benefit that will come to them as a result of that kind of information being in the hands of government bureaucrats. And I have gotten so far nothing but the sound of crickets and a lonely moan of wind. I know that this cannot end well for Americans. What can we do, civilly disobediently, to help prohibit that in light of the NSA and the IRS and all these other scandals?
Well, we've got to work hard in the elections next year to have a bang-up year. Send more conservatives to Jefferson City and Washington. Send back the good ones who have been there in Jefferson City. And hopefully, I believe we can take back the U.S. Senate. We do not have a Senate race in Missouri, but you have listeners in Arkansas. They have a very important Senate race there.
Yes, they do.
In which Congressman Tom Cotton, a decorated war hero and conservative, and that rarest thing, a conservative graduate of Harvard University, and I think he was Special Forces or Green Beret or a Ranger or something. He's an amazing young man. I believe not older than 36. He is challenging Senator Pryor.
Yeah,
and that is the marquee race for us in the country to take back the Senate.
I absolutely agree with you, and I got to tell you, if Americans don't rise up in this upcoming election to replace the lock that Harry Reid has on the Senate, I mean, I don't know how, and I cannot imagine that our founders intended the Senate or even the House or any speaker or majority leader to have to wield that kind of power, to be able to effectively block legislation from even hitting the floor, much less being open for a discussion and or a vote.
Yeah, Mike, can I wrap up with some inspirational words?
Please do.
For us in this battle, they want to, the left-wing media, like the St. Louis and Kansas City newspapers in this state, they want to wear us down. They want to wear you down by attacking you. They want to wear you down by all kinds of means. And so does much of the electronic media. That's why I'm heartened. I'm encouraged by the rise of conservative alternative media like your show, and like Missouri Torch by Dwayne Lester, which everyone should go to. But Bill Bennett, who served in the Reagan administration, you know who I'm talking about. He's a noted author.
Yep.
And another rare bird, conservative guy from higher education, academician, served as drug czar under President Bush and in various capacities under Reagan. He said that he wrote this a few weeks ago. He said, "My favorite novelist, Walker Percy, warned of his greatest fear for America, that Americans would grow weary, that we would crumble from within, that we would become cynical and withdraw." Percy spelled out this fear, quoting now, this fear of seeing America with all our great strength and beauty and freedom gradually subside into decay through default and be defeated not by any outward force, but from within, from weariness, boredom, cynicism, greed, and in the end, helplessness before our great problems. Now, that's what we're up against, the temptation to just quit, Mike. And there's no quit in me, and there's no quit in the 92-year-old veteran of World War II, Ray Sanders, who came out yesterday and stood alongside us. There's no quit in your Ozark Property Rights Coalition that I know met last night. There's no quit among your listeners. Let's stay in this fight, and we will prevail over all these odds.
We're at a position where the choices have been essentially taken from us. We don't really have an opportunity to determine whether or not we're going. There's really no other path to take. It's not we're at the T in the intersection here, where it's no longer a question of going left or right. It's now more a question of life or death. and this isn't political anymore. Now this is just down to plain Jane survival. I've got a quote that I use all the time that says, "Still, if you will not fight for the right when you can easily win without bloodshed, if you will not fight when your victory will be sure and not too costly, you may come to the moment when you will have to fight with all the odds against you and only a precarious chance of survival. There may even be a worse case, and you may have to fight when there is no hope of victory because it is better to perish than live as a slave." And that guy was Winston Churchill, and I think that sums it up pretty well.
Yes, it does. And let me say also, Ronald Reagan, almost 50 years ago, in fact 49 years ago this month, in his famous A Time for Choosing speech, you can Google that speech. It's a classic in the modern American conservative movement. It was on behalf of the losing presidential campaign, Barry Goldwater. And Ronald Reagan said the same line you just said. He said, the choice is not left or right. The choice is up or down. He went on to say, this idea that the government is for the people instead of the people serving the government is still the newest, most revolutionary idea in the history of mankind. And the issue in this election, he said 49 years ago this month, is whether we just abandon the American Revolution and confess that a tiny intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives better than we can plan them ourselves. That is the issue before us. It was the issue before us 50 years ago, and it is now. And I know which side I'm on. I'm proud to stand for liberty against all odds.
Well, I'm proud.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, and God bless you. I appreciate your efforts. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Have a great day. Folks, that was Peter Kinder, Lieutenant Governor in the state here of Missouri. He graciously joined us to kind of give us his insight on what happened over the course of yesterday with his march on the state or the federal park in Missouri. This is the Big Spring National Park. It's a gorgeous place. I've gone up there hiking and camping many times myself. It is a vast wilderness area. It was shut down as a result of all the federal park closures. And Lieutenant Governor Kinder went up there yesterday with a number of veterans and some other state representatives, including State Rep Steve Cookson, State Senator Doug Leibla, Carter County Commissioner John Bailiff, and a group of veterans. Well, when they got up there, word had spread that they were going to go there, and two things occurred. One, the barricades were taken down to essentially limit the impact from a press perspective. They were met by some press, but then more importantly, they were met by they were expecting to go up there with about 8 people, and it turns out that there were probably closer to 75 or 80 volunteers who had gone up there to participate in this act of civil disobedience. And so applause goes out to Kinder and Cookson and Leibla and Bailiff and the other groups and the citizens who stood up. Thank you guys for showing America that we do have a right to be civilly disobedient. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to tackle our last and final topic for today, and that is the overall discussion on the decline of America. I want to kind of address that with you because I think it's important. We're going to make that a short segment. We kind of ran over a little bit on this one. We're going to I'll post this story up on our Facebook, YouTube, and our website pages so that anyone who wants to see this video and hear this interview with Kinder can do that. Apologize for the audio. He was calling on a mobile phone, and it was a little bit echoey there. But it will be available and posted as a video stream, and you'll be able to capture it and listen to it. You can find it at AmericasVoiceNow.org. You'll also be able to find it on our Facebook page at facebook.com/AmericasVoiceNow. And then you'll also be able to find it on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/AmericasVoiceNow. I'll also post this up on Lieutenant Governor Kinder's Facebook page, and then he can share it with his listeners as well. So stick with us, folks. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to take a look at the overall situation of the decline of America, not only domestically, but internationally as well. We are a superpower that are fading like a spark that is suddenly doused in water. And I got to tell you, it's time to take a stand, America. We're going to return in just a moment. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. Again, find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org, facebook.com/America's Voice Now, and youtube.com/America's Voice Now. We'll be back in just a second.